Watching this, it's because you missed either Monday or Tuesday this week. This was a very important day. We talked about the ending of the war in Japan. So, what we talked about before this was Japan expanding, getting to the point where they expanded so much that America wanted to stop them by taking away their oil and their gas. And then Japan responded with Pearl Harbor. Well, what we've talked about also is we talked about the Battle of Midway and the Battle of Iwo Jima. So we looked at kind of like some two very important battles which are similar to the rest of the battles that we would have seen in the Pacific with America and Japan. So that catches us up to where we're at. So what we need to look at today is how America ended the war. Now, how America ended the war is instead of invading Japan like we did with Germany, what we did is we used a nuclear bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945.
On August the 6th, 1945, two American Super Fortress bombers arrived over the Japanese city of Hiroshima on the world's most devastating military mission. The Enola Gay, with Colonel Paul Tibbets at the controls, was about to drop the first atomic bomb, a weapon conceived by a group of international scientists based at Los Alamos in the United States. So far, no one knew exactly what effect the bomb would have, either on the unsuspecting inhabitants below or on the crew of the plane itself. They were soon to find out.
As soon as the bomb went off, the whole inside of the airplane just lit up as if someone had set off a flashbulb. And then we had to wait, and this was our big worry, is what would the blast do when the blast got to the airplane? And finally the blast did arrive. It was like being in an ash can and getting someone kicking. And then we crowded to the window and saw just the whole city completely covered in smoke with this very tall mushroom cloud rising from it.
President Truman had already threatened the Japanese with a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. When the truth was revealed, his words seemed an understatement. Buildings vaporized, so did the clothes on people's backs. Was it a bomb that should never have been dropped? Some people thought so. Others argued that it shortened the war and kept the subsequent peace. One thing was not in doubt. Hiroshima taught mankind the awful truth about nuclear weapons and just what horror they could bestow.
The important thing to understand is that this is a highly debated topic by historians. Many people are going to say that we should have dropped the bomb, and many people are going to say that we should not have dropped the bomb. So, what we're going to do is we're going to look at some different documents, and then you're going to have to summarize 3 of their statements. Now, what I need you to do, make sure that if you need to go back, if you need to rewind this video, that's perfectly fine. Just make sure you can actually get what they're saying. Hey class, so the first source we're going to look at is Marine Tom Sherman Remembers the Battle of Iwo Jima. So if you remember, we talked about Iwo Jima on Monday and Tuesday, or actually we talked about it last week. But what we talked about Iwo Jima is how bad it was. So what Marine Tom Sherman talks about in his source. He talks about being nervous, being scared. And he talks about how everyone was scared and everyone was afraid of going into battle, but it was just something they had to do. He talks a lot about the death and destruction and pain that many of his buddies went through during this battle. One of the main things he talks about is he talks about one of his buddies stepping on a landmine. This landmine sent him flying up in the air, and what landed did not look like a human being anymore. He also talked about different people who he saw destroyed by machine gun fire, and how it would rip apart buddies that he had just been talking to and make them into something that didn't look like humans anymore. So what you really need to talk about with this source is that, hey, this was not a good situation. And he understood that the Japanese were not going to go down without a fight. So at the end of his document, it talks about how he was happy when the nuclear bombs were dropped, because when they were, he was allowed to go home and be with his family and have his life instead of invading Japan. He did get upset because at first he thought that the Japanese were not human. That's one thing that happens in war all the time, guys, is that the enemy is going to be viewed as less than human. So what he does is he views them as less than human. And then later on in life, when he starts having interaction with Japanese people and working with Japanese businessmen, he sees, okay, these guys are actually humans, and I just believe this during war. And so he started to feel bad about the situation and understand that they were human too. They were just put into the same situation that he was. So that's your first source. You need to summarize that with 3 sentences. The next one we have is Shigeku Matsumoto. As you can tell, that is a Japanese person. What happens is, this is testimony from someone who experienced one of the bomb droppings. So they were playing outside whenever the bomb dropped. What happened was the sky turned completely white, super bright, and it knocks them violently back into the bomb shelter they were in. So they go into the bomb shelter and they hide, and of course they're very afraid. This is a very scary situation, and people start coming. And when they start coming, they see that these people are badly injured and in tons of pain. It talks about how they're going to spend 3 days in this bomb shelter with dead bodies that are just piling up. And what's so scary about this is that people are going to have their skin falling off like paper. They're going to have eyeballs falling out. This is something that is very, very violent, and it's going to scar these young children. And the thing we need to understand is that these people right here, the testimony we're reading, they are not from soldiers who are committing all of these wars and doing all these things in war. They are children and civilians. They're not military people. So we need to really make sure we identify that in this summary. So the next summary is Yarosito Tanaka. Obviously, again, a Japanese person. This testimony is, again, from a civilian. So someone who's not in war. Make sure you identify that in your summary of this source. Yasiro Tanaka was 3 years old at the time of the bombing and doesn't remember much, but he remembers that bright light, just like the first group. What happens is he is thrown under a building. Whenever he's dug out by his uncle thinks he's dead because of how badly injured he is. So because he doesn't remember much, he has very small glimpses of memories. And so some of the memories he has is seeing lots and lots of dead bodies. He also his family is stricken with a lot of ailments after the atomic bomb goes off. Because guess what, guys? If an atomic bomb goes off, there's lots of radiation, and there's lots of sicknesses that are going to be caused by this massive bomb. So what happens is he gets things like he'll have scabs show up on his body when he hasn't been cut. His mom is going to have glass grow out of her body, because what happens is the glass is broken up in the atomic bomb so fast and so quick that it goes into her body faster than it could to actually cut her. So it doesn't actually cut her, but it goes into her body. And what happens is your body begins to reject that stuff, so it goes out of her. And then his sister has kidney problems and has to have dialysis once every 3 weeks. They have a lot of medical issues because of this situation. And that's one of those big major things you need to put into this summary, is how big of a deal that is. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the straight facts. Okay, this is facts for America using the bomb. You are going to have to read and summarize for yourself the facts for America not using the bomb. But this is the last one I'm going to go over. And I want to make sure you're writing some things down for this. So we need to write the fact that about 300,000 Americans suffered injuries or death in the Pacific Theater up until this point. So that includes battles like Iwo Jima, Okinawa, Midway, things like that. Americans had experienced a lot of death. And so it's predicted that if America had invaded Japan, there would be 1.7 to 4 million American casualties. So casualties mean people knocked out of the war. So if you are shot in the leg and can't fight anymore, then you're a casualty. It's believed that there would have been in between 400,000 or 800,000 deaths just for Americans. And then finally it's said that 5 to 10 million Japanese would also die in this situation. Instead, about 200,000 people died in the 2 bombs that were dropped. These numbers are predictions. The ones that is like the 1.7 to 4 million American casualties and the 400,000 to 800,000 deaths for Americans and 5 to 10 million Japanese. That's a prediction on if we had invaded Japan. So what we need to understand is, hey, people predict the weather all the time and things don't happen that way. So even though that's a prediction, and most likely it comes from good sources, because we're going to look at things like those battles that we've been having against the Japanese and say, hey, they're ultra committed. They use kamikaze attacks. Remember, that's where they fly the planes into American ships. They're going to use banzai charges, which is like suicidal charges where they yell banzai, which means long live His Majesty the Emperor, into American soldiers. And it's going to be very gruesome, bloody. These Japanese are tremendously committed to their cause. And this is why we decide, hey, 200,000 Japanese people or so many more deaths. And that's one of those reasons that's given for why America dropped the bomb. Now, what you need to do is you need to make sure that you summarize the 4 sources that I've talked about. After you summarize those 4 sources, another source is going to pop up on the screen. This is one that you're going to read and summarize yourself after reading. If you have any more questions, please let me know, and I will make sure to help you. Up until this point, you should have put about 5 summaries together. What you will need to do is you will now need to decide, since this is a debated topic, what do you think? I want a good paragraph summarizing using these documents. What do you think should have been done? Should America have dropped the bomb? Should they not? Should they have done it a different way? I want to hear your thoughts using these primary sources. Let me know what you think. If you have any questions about this, please let me know. It's very, very, very important you get this done.